The attempt to convince conservatives that Mitt Romney is their guy continues with several pieces over the weekend that I saw, including this one from the Daily Beast, in which an author named Peter Beinart says, hey, look, stop worrying about Mitt Romney getting into office and then turning into a rhino. He says Romney's promised to be a conservative, and he'll be forced to be because his contention is conservatives are the only thing left in this party. A few snippets. It seems to be a bit of a snotty piece. And the overall point, one of the points he's making, I agree with, but that's about it. He says conservatives see Romney as a flip-flopper of no convictions who shouldn't be the GOP nominee, but he would be a conservative president because that's the only kind of Republican he can be these days. He says, a piece of advice to my conservative friends, cheer up. You've spent the last year desperately trying to nominate someone other than Mitt Romney for president. You've tried to draft Sarah Palin, Chris Christie, Mitch Daniels, Paul Ryan. You've rallied around Michelle Bachmann and then Rick Perry, now Herman Cain. But he says, lucky for you, you've failed. Mounting a well-funded, well-organized presidential campaign, avoiding scandal, and not making a fool of yourself in debates turns out to be surprisingly difficult. And so it now looks more likely than it has since the presidential campaign began, that despite your best efforts, your party will nominate Mitt Romney, the only candidate with a good chance to win. I notice he says your party. So I think that he's either Democrat or claiming to be independent here. He says, I know you don't like Romney. You don't think he is a conviction politician. When it suited his purposes in Massachusetts, he acted like a liberal. Now he's acting like a conservative. That's depressing to those of you who hunger for authenticity, for bravery, for someone untainted by Washington's duplicitous ways. But with all due respect, I think you're missing the point. He says it doesn't matter all that much what Mitt Romney believes or whether he believes much of anything. Romney will be a very conservative president because that's the only kind of president a Republican can be these days. Once upon a time, there was a species in Washington called the moderate Republican, but no more. And then he goes on and bloviates another 3 pages from there. Here's my deal. I'm not worried about Romney turning back into a rhino, and I don't think that a lot of conservatives are either. He's not going to turn into a rhino or some flaming rib. That's not the worry. At least that's not my worry. He's not going to flip-flop again on abortion or gun rights or the other stuff. You don't have to worry about that. Nor is he going to fail to stop Obamacare. I think that if that's your concern, you're being a little silly. He's not going to vow time and time again to kill off Obamacare and then get into office and go, ha, gotcha, I really like Obamacare. These shouldn't be your worry. That's one of his signature promises. He's going to keep that promise. Now, if you're worried that he will govern as a rhino or as a liberal, I think your fears are a bit misplaced. But I agree with Beinart on that point. He will at least initially get into office and follow the conservative principle. Here's my fear with Romney. It's that he will be reluctant to really move the conservative agenda. He can say he's a conservative. He can give it lip service. He can do all of the things. Once he gets into office, he can do all the things that he's promised on the campaign trail. Because other than end Obamacare, the promises that he's made really have been tinkering around the edges. Yeah, I'll cut some spending. Yeah, I'll do some entitlement reform. He hasn't promised as much as Rick Perry or Herman Cain are promising, that's for sure. What I'm worried is he's going to get into office and be a caretaker president. I don't fear a Romney presidency. I don't fear it. I'm reluctant. I have a reluctance. I'm certain that I'm right about this. I am justified in my reluctance. No, I don't think Romney will be a rhino president. He's not going to flip. He's not going to turn into a liberal. He will be, mark my words, he will be a caretaker president. He'll stop Obamacare. He'll maybe do some spending cuts around the edges. He'll maybe propose some reforms to entitlements around the edges, which he may or may not get approval for. You know how difficult it is to actually get entitlement changes. And he can do that depending on the makeup of Congress, but he will not get into office and, by God, push the conservative agenda. I guarantee it. It's not in his nature. It's not in his nature to be bold. It's in his nature to nibble around the edges and be careful. He's been a very careful politician. He will largely maintain the status quo. That's going to be Romney. And I suppose that's okay if the Democrats keep the Senate anyway. But if the Republicans gain control of the Senate, we need a Rick Perry or someone more conservative who is going to aggressively try to move the conservative agenda. I want someone who, if the Congress lines up properly in 2012, is going to get into office and do on a national scale what Scott Walker did here in Wisconsin on a more local scale. I want someone who seizes the opportunity and isn't too meek or too afraid or too moderate to, by God, move the conservative ball. Pick up that conservative ball and move this country to the right in any and all ways you can. And I just don't see Mitt as being aggressive enough in that regard. That's why he's my second or third choice. He's not my first. Do I fear he'll flip-flop back he'll revert to his liberal positions on things? No. I mean, don't be silly. He won't do that. And in that regard, the author's right. He won't be able to. We'll hold him to a more conservative standard. But I guarantee you, he will be a caretaker president. He won't propose anything bold, and my fear is he may well stand against some of the more bold proposals that come out of the House and Senate if the Republicans do control those bodies. You don't think that Mitt Romney might look twice or three times at Paul Ryan in the House saying we've got to go to a two-tiered flat tax, and the guys in the Senate agreeing, only to get to Romney? Well, I don't know. I mean, this seems like it might be a little. It might not be really fair to start taxing those people on the lower rungs again. That's my fear. We want someone with some stones in this White House and someone that will move the conservative ball. He's not that. Is he going to be better than Obama? And if he's the nominee, yeah, sure. But he'll be a caretaker president. Mark my words.